She is gone, the bride's mother gasped, white to the lips, clutching the door of the vestry. Cassandra is gone, fled. There is a note. Oh, what is to become of us? The Duke of Farrowgate stood at the foot of the altar of the crowded cathedral and felt the whole bright weight of the morning shift beneath him like ice on a thawing river. Behind him, 400 of the best families in 3 counties filled the pews in their silks and their feathers, come to see the great Duke of Farrowgate wed the celebrated beauty of the season. And the celebrated beauty had climbed out of a window and bolted with the music master, leaving her family to drown in the scandal. Ferdinand did not move. He had learned in a hard life that a man who does not move cannot be seen to stagger. But within the still column of his body, beneath the dark wedding coat and the high collar, something cold was spreading, jilted. Before all of them, the cold Duke of Farrowgate, left standing at his own altar like a fool. There was a scuffle by the vestry door, hissing, urgent voices. And then the bride's father, sweeting in grey, came hurrying up the aisle, propelling before him by the elbow another young woman, a girl plain and pale, in a hastily borrowed veil that did not quite fit her plain gown showing beneath the lace. "Your Grace," the father said, low and desperate, half bowing as he thrust her forward. "Your Grace, I beg you, the contract, the families, the shame would ruin us all. My younger daughter, Ottilie. She is unwed and willing and of the same blood, and no one out there need ever know which sister you." He could not finish it. He simply pushed the plain sister another step toward the Duke and stood back, trembling, as though he had laid an offering on an altar he expected to be struck down from. Ferdinand looked at her. She was nothing like her sister. Where Cassandra had been all gold and dazzle, this one was brown-haired and quiet-eyed, her face too grave for prettiness, a girl plainly accustomed to standing at the edge of every room, while her sister stood at the center. She had been dragged here in the space of a minute. The veil was crooked. Her hands, he saw, were shaking, but her chin was up, and she was looking at him directly, which not one person in that cathedral had dared to do since the news broke. "This is monstrous," Ferdinand said quietly, for her ears alone. "You know that. They are offering you to me like a spare coat to cover their shame, because the first one did not fit." "Yes," Ottilie Frame said. Her voice was low and steady, though her hands shook. "I know exactly what they are doing. I have always known what I am to them. The spare, the plain one, the one they put forward when the pretty one fails." She drew a breath. "I am sorry, Your Grace. You came here to be married, and instead you have been humiliated, and now they wish to humiliate you a second time by foisting me upon you. You owe my family nothing. If you turn and walk out of this church, I will not blame you. I will tell everyone it was my doing." Ferdinand stared at her. In a lifetime of being flattered, schemed at, and married toward by every ambitious family in the kingdom, no one had ever offered to take the blame for him. No one had ever, at the moment of his deepest public humiliation, thought first of his dignity instead of their own advantage. "You would take the scandal upon yourself," he said slowly, "to spare a man you have known for 1 minute. You did not deserve what my sister did to you." Her grave eyes did not waver. "Whatever else I am not cruel. And it was cruel to leave you standing here before all these people. Someone ought to say so to you plainly, and no one else will, because you frighten them. So I will. It was cruel, and you did not deserve it, and I am sorry." 400 people sat watching. The bride's family stood drowning. The organ had fallen silent. And the Duke of Farrowgate, who had walked into that cathedral to wed a beauty and be admired, looked at the plain overlooked girl they had shoved forward as an afterthought, and felt the cold thing inside him go suddenly, strangely still. "What is your name again?" he asked. "Ottilie." "Ottilie," he said it once, as though weighing it. Then, deliberately, in a voice that carried, that he meant to carry, to every silk-clad ear in that vast cold church, the Duke of Farrowgate took the plain sister's trembling hand, and turned to face the assembled best families of 3 counties. "My friends," he said, "there has been a small confusion of names this morning. The lady I am to marry is Miss Ottilie Frame." He let the silence ring. Anyone who heard otherwise was mistaken. "Shall we proceed?" A wave of shock went through the pews like wind through a wheat field. The bride's mother made a sound that was half sob and half disbelieving laugh, and Ottilie turned her face up to him, the crooked veil framing her plain grave features, her eyes wide with astonishment. "Your Grace," she whispered, "you need not, you are only being kind, to spare them, you do not have to." "I am the Duke of Farrowgate," he murmured back, for her alone, the ghost of something that was almost warmth at the corner of his hard mouth. "I have never once in my life done a thing because I had to. Stand up straight, Ottilie. The veil is crooked. Let me." And before all of them, the feared Cold Duke reached out and gently straightened the borrowed lace upon her brown hair, as a man might who had all the time in the world and no fear of any soul in that room. They were married within the hour. The vows were strange ones. He spoke them to a woman whose face he had first seen 10 minutes before, in a church still humming with the scandal of the sister who had fled. And yet, when the moment came to say them, the Duke of Farrowgate found that he did not say them as a man performs a distasteful duty. He said them looking down into Ottilie's grave, steady eyes, and he meant them more than he had expected to, and when the priest pronounced them man and wife, he saw her draw a breath as though she had been holding it since the window bolting had begun, and something in him eased to see her ease. The wedding breakfast that followed was a wretched, brittle affair, the guests not knowing whether to congratulate or to gossip, the bride's family green with relief and shame in equal parts. Through all of it Ottilie sat composed at his side, and answered what was said to her with quiet courtesy, and gave not one of those staring strangers the satisfaction of seeing her flinch, and the Duke of Farrowgate, watching her bear it, found his cold contempt for the whole grasping clan, curiously, did not extend to her at all. He did not, of course, know her yet. A marriage made in a minute is no marriage of hearts. He took her home to Farrowgate, his great grey pile of a house, and gave her every courtesy and asked nothing of her, and watched. And what the Duke of Farrowgate learned, over the weeks that followed, was that he had got a wife worth 10 of the beauty who had climbed out of the window. He learned it in small things. He learned it when she did not flatter him, not once, but answered his hard questions with her own opinions and held them when he pushed, so that he found himself, for the first time in years, in conversation rather than in court. He learned it watching her with his servants, with his tenants, with the old steward whom everyone else found tiresome, and whom Ottilie sat with for an hour to hear about his rheumatism. He learned it the night he came home grim and cold from a quarrel with his man of business and found that she had, unbidden, laid out the very papers he needed and quietly understood the whole tangle of it, and offered him one clear sentence that cut the knot. He learned it, too, in the way she took up the running of his great cold house. The beauty, he did not doubt, would have filled Farrowgate with feathered guests and card tables and demanded a box at every entertainment in town. Ottilie did none of these things. She walked the house from cellar to attic in her first week and learned the name of every soul who served in it, and she went out among his tenants in all weathers as he himself did, and came back with her plain boots muddied, and her head full of which roofs leaked, and which widows wanted coal, and which farmer's boy was clever enough to be worth schooling. She did not tell him these things to be praised. She told him because she had decided, quietly and without consulting anyone, that the wife of the Duke of Farrowgate had work to do, and she meant to do it, whether the Duke had want her for it or not. "You need not trouble yourself with the East cottages," he told her once, watching her draw on her gloves to walk out into a grey drizzle. "I have a steward for such things." "You have a steward who is 70 and whose knees pain him in the wet," Ottilie said, settling her bonnet. "And I have 2 good legs and a free afternoon. It is no trouble, Ferdinand. It is the only thing I have ever been good for." being useful where no one was looking. I should not like to give it up merely because I have become a duchess. And she had gone out into the rain, and the Duke of Farrowgate had stood at the long window and watched her plain grey figure cross his sodden park toward the cottages, and had felt something move in his chest that he had no name for and did not, just then, dare to examine. It was that same week, untangling the business papers she had set out for him, that he had asked her how she had known precisely which documents he wanted and which sentence would cut the knot. "No one ever looks at the plain sister," Ottilie said simply, not bitterly. "So the plain sister learns to look at everyone else. I have spent my life watching from the edges of rooms, Your Grace. I notice a great deal." It was, he thought, the most extraordinary thing anyone had ever said to him, because it was true, and because she did not say it to win his pity. She said it the way one states the weather. And the Duke of Farrowgate, who had been looked at his whole life, flattered and feared and feted, his every word weighed and his every favour courted, found that he had never once in all those years been truly seen by any of them, and that this quiet brown-haired girl they had pushed at him as an afterthought saw straight through to the bottom of him and was neither dazzled nor afraid. The winter wore on, and the great cold house grew, by some quiet alchemy he could not have traced, less cold. He had not noticed when it began. He noticed only that he had taken to lingering at the breakfast table to hear what she thought of the morning's letters, and that he found excuses to walk the long gallery at the hour she liked to walk it, and that the sound of her low, even voice answering a servant in the next room had become, somehow, the most settling sound in his house. He, who had kept every soul in his life at arm's length, discovered that he had let this one woman past his guard without ever deciding to, and that he did not want her back on the other side of it. He told himself it was companionship. He told himself it was respect for a sensible wife. He went on telling himself such things until the evening a letter came from her family, sleek, oily, congratulatory, full of how delighted they were that dear Ottilie had landed so well, and might they presume upon the connection for an introduction or two for the elder girl, now returned chastened from her folly. He watched his wife read it. He watched the old, schooled flinch cross her grave face, the flinch of a girl long accustomed to being valued only for what use she might be, and watched her fold it away and say nothing, and something in the Duke of Farrowgate went hard and bright and certain. "Ferdinand," he said. She blinked. "Your Grace?" "My name is Ferdinand. You are my wife. I should like, I find, to be Ferdinand to you." He looked at her across the candlelit table, at the grave quiet face he had once thought too plain for prettiness, and now could not, somehow, stop looking at. "You said in the church that you had always known what you were to your family, the spare, the overlooked one. I want you to know what you are to me." She had gone very still. "You are the only person in my entire life," the Duke said low, "who stood before me at the worst moment of my pride and thought of my dignity before your own. You are the only one who has never feared me enough to flatter me, nor despised me enough to use me. They sent you to me as an afterthought, Ottilie, to save their own faces. And I have come to think you are the truest thing that ever happened to me, and I will not have you spend one more day under this roof believing yourself second to anyone, least of all to the woman who climbed out of a window and missed the finest fortune of her life." Ottilie's grave composure broke at last. Her eyes filled. "You truly mean it," she whispered. "You do not merely tolerate me. You chose me, not to be kind, not to spare them. You would choose me again." "Gladly." He came around the table and took both her shaking hands in his, the great Duke of Farrowgate kneeling, actually kneeling, on the cold flags of his own dining hall, before the plain sister no one had ever wanted, gladly, and before all the world, and as many times as you will have me. "I married you in a minute to save your family's name. I tell you now I would marry you in earnest, knowing all I know, choosing you with my whole heart, if I had the chance to do it again. You shall not need a second wedding to be believed. she said, half laughing through her tears, her fingers tightening on his. I believe you, Ferdinand, I believe you. When her family came to call that spring, sleek and smiling now, all their shame forgotten, eager to bask in the great match that had so miraculously befallen their overlooked daughter, they found the Duke and Duchess of Farrowgate walking arm in arm in the long gallery, heads bent close, laughing at some private thing. And they found, to their considerable discomfort, that the Duke had grown extremely particular about who was permitted to slight his wife in his hearing, and that he had a way of looking at a person, with his cold dark eyes, that made the old habit of Corley, the plain one, die very quickly in the throat. It was the mother who erred first, as the mother always had. Settling herself in the Duke's grand drawing-room with the air of one come into her rightful inheritance, she had remarked, with a fond little laugh, how fortunate it was that dear Ottilie had been on hand that dreadful morning, how providential, for of course no one had ever expected the quiet one to make any sort of match at all, and here she was a duchess, and really it had all worked out for the best, had it not? The room went cold. The Duke of Farrowgate set down his cup. "You mistake the matter, madam," he said, and though his voice was perfectly level, every soul present felt the frost in it. It did not work out for the best by accident, as one finds a coin in the road. I married your younger daughter because in the worst hour of my life, she was the only person in a church of 400 who thought aught of my dignity before her own advantage, yours included. You did not give me a duchess that morning. You attempted to hand me a substitute to cover your shame, and were too occupied with your own ruin to notice you were handing me the finest woman I have ever known. That you got a duchess out of it is no credit to your providence. It is in spite of you, and I will thank you to remember it under my roof." The mother's mouth opened and shut, the father studied the carpet, and Ottilie, seated by the fire with her needlework, looked up at her husband with shining eyes and did not say a word, because none was needed. "You needn't have been so fierce with them," Ottilie told him afterward, though her eyes were dancing. "They sent you to me as the lesser sister," the Duke said. "I have spent these months learning that they sent me the better one. I find I cannot help correcting their arithmetic." He drew her hand through his arm. "Besides, a man may say what he likes in his own house about the woman he loves. And I love you, Ottilie Frame, overlooked, undervalued, and the great good fortune of my whole life. Let them flee from windows. I shall be here, with you, where I have always meant to be." And the plain sister, who had been pushed forward to save a wedding, and had been chosen instead to share a life, leaned her head against the shoulder of the Duke, who had wanted her in earnest, and knew herself, at last and forever, to be no one's afterthought at all.